Hello and welcome to ProLab Studio. My name is Michael Gallion, and today we are going to talk about pest birds. Specifically, what is a pest bird? I know that may sound like a silly subject for us to cover, but you'd be amazed at what the perception of pest birds are to technicians, especially pest control specialists, versus the customer. And that's why we wanted to do an episode about this particular subject. My name is Michael Gallion. As I mentioned, I do business development for Bird Barrier, and today I'm just going to come at you solo. We're going to be doing a lot more podcasts in the future, and of course, we're always looking for subjects that people have questions on, and this was one of the things that seems to come up on the customer side, and that's why we're going to define this particular area, because it's kind of the starting point really for bird control. Why there is even a bird control industry at all has to do with pest birds. And so to define a pest bird, it's mostly about the perception for the end customer that especially is going to be willing to pay for a solution. In other words, the biggest definer of what a pest bird really is whether or not somebody, whether it's a person at a home, a person at a small commercial property, or even an industrial complex, has birds that have somehow connected to the human interaction and are creating a problem for the human side of things. That's generally it. Now, what happens especially in the world of pest control, there will be an assumption that birds on a property are always going to be pest birds. And that's not the case. You'd be amazed, as opposed to other pests that are out there, roaches, rodents, these sort of things, they're almost always perceived as a problem if they somehow have found their way into a structure where either a human lives or works or functions in some way. They are very forgiving, though, when it comes to birds. People have this, sort of love relationship for birds that's unique in that they don't want to see birds harmed. If you go through our training, that's probably the first thing that comes up in the introduction of bird control. We talk about the fact that you don't want to harm birds. So when you have a structure, and that's where we hear the term structural pest control. Most pest control is defined as structural, and that's because in a structure, and especially when it comes to birds, the structure can be controlled. The idea of structures is that they are sealed up completely. Well, everything as far as entry points, the doors are kept shut. There are seals that go under the door to keep the climate under control, but those also double to prevent any kind of pests, insects, no matter how small, from getting into the facility and creating this completely sealed structure for human habitation where pests are not a problem. With birds, the same principle applies. And what happens, though, with structures that make birds different is that the exterior is usually 80% of the problem. There are a lot of birds that do get inside, but what we're talking about are structures where the bird itself has become fixated on that structure for their survival. Now, what we use in the world of bird control is the term resident bird. And the reason we use this term is that a resident bird is now fixated on that property for its survival, reproduction, and future generations that come from these particular pest birds will also be fixated on that structure. And so just because the bird becomes a resident bird on a structure does not automatically mean that it is a pest. People, again, they're amazingly forgiving when it comes to birds. The droppings and the mess that comes from them, they will generally accept. And we'll see a lot of different businesses. And it could be A business like a car wash, for example, is known to draw in pest birds. The pest birds become residents because there's a great water source constantly around car washes. And you would think that all car wash operators would see the birds as a real problem for their operation, because the bird droppings will, fall on freshly cleaned cars, perhaps, that sort of thing. Well, as long as the car wash has their system down and the birds don't interfere with their operation, they generally won't be able to spend much money for that, because the margins are so low for a car wash operator, for example. So until there is a problem that interferes with the business or the function or the human elements, will a bird actually be defined as a pest? So the point of this is that if you are in the world of bird control and you are looking to solve bird problems and you're looking for opportunities to do bird work, it's usually not beneficial to cold call and just randomly go into businesses where you see birds are obviously have transferred and become resident birds, and they are fixated on a structure, and then try to sell on the idea that it should be solved. Now, we do see people that are effective in terms of solving bird problems where they cold call and go in cases where the customer wasn't aware that bird control as an industry even exists, or that there are solutions available, especially solutions that don't harm the birds, solutions where you can go in and get the birds to relocate somewhere else without harming them, at the same time improving the look and the operation of the facility itself by using the proper deterrent methods. So when we say pest birds, just remember it has all to do with the perception of the customer who would be willing to pay to have that problem solved. That's the biggest defining characteristic. Now, there are facilities like food facilities, for example, that have zero tolerance for birds because of their operation. And they too may not be aware of what methods are available for solving the problems. And by default, those birds are going to be considered a pest that needs to be solved. And so there's the big difference. They're not going to have a perception issue, because it absolutely is imperative to their operation that they cannot function with any pest interfering and especially commingling with their product and their output of their inventory and that sort of thing. So the key characteristics are that the customer has a perception that the problem needs to be solved. That's where we talk about what a real pest bird is. The pest bird itself can become a resident bird to a structure. There are also pest birds that are not tied to structures. This is where we get into open air situations, perhaps at airports, where the birds creating the problem are not really fixated on the structure or the airport terminal or the hangars, although those are common places for pest birds. Open fields, open bodies of water near airports, those can be viewed as structures in and of themselves, even though there was no human construction that created that structure. So hopefully this helps you understand what we mean when we define a pest bird. Okay? This is one of many podcasts that we're doing to help train people in the world of modern bird control. Again, my name is Michael Gallion, and we will see you at the next podcast.